hello. Just want to thank you all for taking the time out of your lives to come together for this meeting. My name is Ritchie. I'm here on behalf of my company, Burkins, Ritchie Associates. This is your employee session for the drug-free workplace program. In Ohio, we call it the drug-free safety program. All right. I'd like to ask you a question. How many of you have someone or something that counts on you for its very existence? Okay. And that may be your significant other, maybe your spouse, your sweetheart, could be your child or grandchild, niece, nephew, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, your fur babies, dog, cat. The important thing is that that particular person, that particular creature is important to you. And that you're important to it or to them. And what I'd like you to do is just take a second and just close your eyes and think about that person. Because if something were, God forbid, worst case scenario to happen to one of us, just imagine what would happen to that person or to that creature. Although most of us would like to believe that there would be someone who would step up and take care of them the way that we would, in most cases, that's just unfortunately not the case. And if we were just to leave those folks, those loved ones, to the tender mercies of the world, that's something that for many of us is just unthinkable. I mention that because the reason why we're doing all of this is to help to make sure that everybody's getting home in one piece at the end of the day. So there's going to be three key themes that I'd like you to focus on. These are going to run like threads through the topics that I discussed today. The first theme is going to be integrity. Integrity is just doing the right thing for the right reason. I think of integrity and character often in terms of what do folks do for people who can do nothing for them? What do people do when nobody's watching? Not that. But what do they do when they, not for the kudos that somebody might give them, or not because they can get some likes on social media, just doing the next right thing because it's the right thing to do. Integrity. The second theme is the idea of choices and consequences. We all live lives of seconds and inches, where if we were just a little bit that way or a little bit that way, or if we were running a little bit behind, or if we just had been there a little bit sooner, our lives perhaps could have changed irreversibly one way or another. The decisions that we make in the moment have far-reaching consequences and can create ripples that can flow across the universe. Certainly within the hula hoop of the circle of our lives and the people that mean the most to us. And then finally, that interconnectivity. Again, the idea that what one of us does can affect the rest of us, that we can have that domino effect. And it's sometimes we can lose sight of the big picture in our day-to-day decisions, our day-to-day choices. We can lose sight of how doing those little things right can make a big impact one way or another. The journey of 1,000 miles, etc. All right. So our objectives today, our first one is going to be talking about the drug-free safety program, and most importantly, what's in it for you? What's in it for me meaning you actually. How are you going to benefit from implementing this program? what's the use? The second is what's the haps? I chose that term in particular because a very smartly dressed young man at the gas station the other day, while I was waiting in line, approached me and asked me that very question. What's the haps? I just thought it was a cool way to talk, to think about what's new, what's going on, what's different. I also want to warn you, to help you to avoid some of the bear traps that we're seeing that are disrupting people's lives, that are disrupting their lives, and as far as their career, that are putting them through embarrassing, costly, sometimes dangerous situations. Help you avoid the monkey traps too. Quick show of hands, any of you familiar with monkey traps? Good. And we'll at least learn one thing there. And last thing we'll do is go over our Q&A. Okay. So, again, getting back to that, what's in it for me? Let's go over some quick stats that apply to substance use disorders in the workplace. The first one I'd like to share with you is a recent study that was released by the U.S. Department of Labor that found that approximately 65%, nearly 2 out of 3, workplace accidents are caused by a substance-impaired worker. Now, those aren't necessarily those are all the accidents combined, and so some of them are minor, some of them are more severe, but 65, 2 out of 3 in general, are deemed to have been caused by somebody who was not in the right state of mind due to their recent use of alcohol or some other drug abuse. The second statistic from OSHA, from the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, found that approximately 1 out of 3, about 33% of catastrophic workplace injuries, those injuries that result in a fatality, in a hospitalization, an amputation, or the loss of an eye, those accidents that do, in fact, either end a life or change a life permanently, are caused by somebody who in post-accident substance testing has a blood alcohol concentration of 0.08 or higher, meaning that if they got pulled over on the way to work, they would have been arrested for an OVI, or they had such a sky-high level of one of the prohibited drugs of abuse in their system at the time of that accident that it was determined that it was the presence of that substance in their system that was the primary or proximate cause of that accident. 1 in 3. And that's finally caught up to what the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has known for years, that about 1 in 3 highway fatalities is caused by a substance-impaired motorist. So again, if we can take measures, if we can put into place a system to be able to help to mitigate these risks, if we can put into place a program by which we can make it less likely that somebody's going to be drunk or high on the job or on the roads and interfere with us making it home to our loved ones, then that's why we're doing what we're doing. That's the primary reason. All right. So the main reason why we're doing this again is safety. Now, beyond safety, the other primary reason why we're doing this is because of regulatory reasons. The Bureau of Workers' Compensation has rolled out enhanced enforcement of their guidelines for the state's drug-free workplace program, particularly for state contractors. They found that there were some gaps or some loopholes that needed to be closed. They've closed those, and so they not only ramped up the expectations for employers and the requirements for you, but also the consequences for failing to adhere to those guidelines and to meet those expectations. because of the Drug-Free Workplace Act of 1988 and the state laws that followed, if you are a construction contractor that wants to work on any publicly funded project, whether it's a local project, city, county, state, federal, if it's funded by taxpayer dollars, then when your company bids on that job, the awarding authority, the very first thing they check to see whether or not you are eligible to be awarded that contract is to see whether or not you are in good standing and whether you're listed in your state's database of drug-free contractors. If you are not listed in that database, you are not eligible to be awarded that job. If that happens too often, those jobs get awarded to your competitors. And those big prevailing wage checks stop coming in. Then paychecks stop going out. It's not necessarily something that's top of mind for most folks, but it can certainly have a very significant and detrimental impact on your life if that revenue stream is interrupted. Again, not the most important reason by any means that we're doing this. Again, safety always is, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention that. Now, in order to maintain that good standing in that database of drug-free contractors, there are 5 elements that have to be present. The first is a written policy. For those of you who have not updated your policy for some time, there have been enough changes that have occurred at the state and federal level that it's probably time for you to update your policy. That is a service that we offer that we can help you with. There is also a funding opportunity through the state of Ohio, part of the Substance Use Recovery and Workplace Safety Program, that will fully reimburse the cost of having your policy redone for eligible employers. So if you're still using a policy that was written back in 2004 or 2007 or whatever, it's probably time to tweak that and tighten it up. Every policy document is going to have 2 essential elements to it. The first are going to be certain protections for workers. There will be due process protections, meaning that the policy has to be applied fairly for everyone. There are also privacy protections. There are some elements of this program that are going to result in the provision of medical services. Maybe in the form of substance testing, maybe in the form of a post-accident evaluation. It may mean an employee assistance program evaluation. It could mean counseling and rehabilitative services. All of those would fall under the purview of a medical service. They would have the same privacy protections as if you went to a doctor, went to a hospital, anything else. There are also certain obligations for us. And the most basic of those obligations is our obligation to be fit for duty when we're on the job. Now, fitness for duty has 2 essential elements to it. Fitness for duty requires us to be both sufficiently mentally alert and physically capable of safely performing our job responsibilities. All right. Sufficiently mentally alert, physically capable. Now, lots of things can cause a person not to be fit for duty. It could be fatigue, injury, illness, emotional distress, a bad reaction to medication or lack of medication, substance misuse. Really too many things to list here. But regardless of what's causing a person not to be fit for duty, if you're not safe to be on the job, you shouldn't be on the job. Right. Beyond the policy, there's also training requirements. There's annual employee education, which we're doing now, annual supervisory education, which we'll be doing next. And there's the BWC now has if you are participating at the basic or advanced level of the drug-free safety program, as a supervisor, you are required to also complete accident analysis fundamentals training. That is a one-time, lifetime requirement, but part of those enhanced guidelines that I mentioned earlier is that when your company submits its annual report in March, at the end of the program year, you are obligated to submit a certificate of completion for every supervisor who has completed that course, whether you completed it online in the BWC Learning Center, or whether you did it in person and were issued a certificate of completion from the BWC approved vendor. But either way, that's a mandatory thing that must be done. And that is something that folks are getting nicked for, or that they're getting sanctioned for, is for not having done that. That was one of the loopholes that got closed. Okay. And that we also have workplace drug testing. The first time that most of you will be tested at work is for pre-employment screening. 100% of workers have to be tested there. And I want to clarify something a question I've been asked more and more recently. And so I'm not sure what happened that this is going on. I believe it likely has something to do with the utilization of temporary workers. But I've been getting asked a lot, can we do pre-employment or post-hire testing? Can we do either or? And the answer is no. You are required to do 100% pre-employment testing. Now, if you choose to have a probationary period during which you include extra post-hire testing or extra new hire testing, where at any time for any reason you can just do a random test on that person, that's in your purview as an employer. You can include that in your policy if you like. But you can't use the fact that you're doing new hire or post-offer testing as an excuse not to complete pre-employment testing. That won't fly with the Bureau. Okay. There's also post-accident testing. In the state of Ohio, if you are injured badly enough that you require post-accident medical treatment, so if you have to go to a hospital or to a stat care, even if it's just for a few stitches or an x-ray, or because you got banged up and you have to get checked out, at the time that you receive that treatment, you are obligated to undergo post-accident substance testing. That is part of what Ohio calls the rebuttable presumption laws. You have 32 hours from the time the accident happens to get the urine testing done, or 8 hours to be tested for alcohol. Okay. And if you are injured on the job and you are sent home after you go to the hospital or whatever, and they have not tested you, and you do not go back, you do not report back to the job, you just go straight home, please make sure you do not ingest any alcohol until 8 hours elapses or until an alcohol test is administered. Because at any time after that accident happens, you may be contacted and asked to go for that test, even though the hospital didn't conduct it, or the stat care or whatever. If you get called to go back for that test, the testing facility is not going to be able to figure out when you put that alcohol into your body. And if there's alcohol in there, they're going to assume it was in there at the time of the accident. All right. I'm just telling you that is a word to the wise. As far as reasonable suspicion testing goes, as supervisors, most of us are not medical professionals. We are not able to diagnose what's causing a person to be showing profound indicators of impairment. So what we can do is recognize that a person is in trouble and needs help, and then we can make a referral for that person to be safely and discreetly removed from duty and evaluated. Now, part of that evaluation is going to be testing for the presence of alcohol and other drugs. But as I mentioned earlier, in most cases, that's probably not what's causing it. Just like if an ambulance is driving through a park and sees someone laying on the sidewalk unconscious, and they get out, they check for signs of life, the person isn't breathing, there's no heart rate, what's the first thing they're going to do? They're going to administer CPR, but they're also, before they do that, going to administer Narcan. Because unfortunately, in Ohio and in most parts of the country, if a person is found unconscious or with a cardiac emergency, it's more likely that they got that way because of an opioid poisoning than just some congenital heart issue or some epigenetic heart issue. There's also random testing. If you have certain job classifications, your name may be placed in a random testing pool or in several random testing pools. How many of you are working on state-funded projects or occasionally do work on state-funded projects? Okay. Then your employer is going to be responsible for making sure that those of you who are working on those jobs, whether you're providing labor or supervision, are listed and are included in a consortium or a random testing pool that draws at 5%, and your name will stay in that random testing pool for the duration of that project. That is not the responsibility of the general contractor. That's the responsibility of the employer to make sure that you're listed in that your name is in that pool. And every time that there is a drawing, again, it's a very low percentage, but every time there's a drawing, you have an equal chance of being drawn. So just because you've been drawn once doesn't mean you can't be drawn again. Theoretically, you can be drawn every single time, or you may never be drawn at all. But as long as that project is going on, you have a chance that you may be. All right. And then the last type of testing I want to mention is return to duty or follow-up testing. This is a very specific type of testing that is only utilized if a person has been off duty due to a violation of the alcohol and drug testing program, or if they've completed substance-related treatment. Before they can return to duty, they have to have a clean return-to-duty drug screen, and then they're going to have several follow-up tests afterward over the course of the next 12 to 60 months, depending on the type of violation or the type of treatment they're receiving. There's a number of different substances that are tested for. In the workplace, these are mandatory substances that must be included in covered by your company's policy if you are participating in the drug-free workplace program. The first are the stimulants, the amphetamines, methamphetamine, also cocaine. There's been a resurgence of the positivity rate with methamphetamine and coke as labor shortage has dragged on, and more and more folks have been burned out and overwhelmed. Seems like more folks are looking for a little extra and trying to find something to give them a little boost. At least the positivity numbers are showing that. They also test for ecstasy or MDMA. They test for 6-acetylmorphine, which is a metabolite that's exclusive to heroin and is not present in any other opioids. So you can't test positive for 6-acetylmorphine because you took hydrocodone after you went to the dentist. The only way you're going to test positive for 6-AM is if you recently used heroin within the last, I think, 6 to 8 hours. And they also test for the other opioids. We are encouraging our partner companies to expand, to talk to their occupational medicine facilities to ask for the extended opioid panel when they're testing for opioids, to include the fully synthetics, the fentanyl analogs, and the isotinazine, etc. Those may not show up on a standard opioid panel, and with those flooding our streets, it's important that we test for the things that may be there. You don't want to miss the opportunity to help somebody who's got that kind of problem, because again, living lives of seconds and inches, getting that wrong one time could be the last time. We also test for PCP still, which is a kind of baffling to me, but I guess it's because it is such a powerful drug. It's something that you don't want, such a powerful hallucinogen. You don't want somebody using it on the job, for sure. And then we're still testing for marijuana. So testing for delta-9 THC, the active metabolite of marijuana. And so let's jump right into that. Okay. Now, this is where we're getting to the bear traps that I was mentioning before. These are some of those common issues that people are running into that are painful and messy and embarrassing, but avoidable. All right. So there's been a lot of confusion after Ohio voters passed Issue 2 last November. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with Issue 2, that was the voter referendum to approve recreational marijuana for adults in the state of Ohio. Okay. And it won resoundingly. It was almost a 60%, not quite, but almost 60% of voters approved it. Now, even though we became the 24th recreational state to have marijuana, recreational marijuana available to us, we've had medical marijuana available since 2016. Right. And so it wasn't that big of a seismic shock. It's been legal here for adults. If you had a medical card for some time, now it's legal for all adults, whether you have a card or not. However, going back to 1970, the Nixon administration Schedule I marijuana. They put marijuana in when they passed the Controlled Substance Act in 1970, they included marijuana among the most dangerous drugs known to man. They included it along with drugs like LSD, MDMA, DMT, GHB, psilocybin mushrooms, quaaludes, peyote, heroin, and, of course, marijuana. A Schedule I designation means that in the eyes of the federal government, that drug is so dangerous that it's not even safe for use under direct medical scrutiny, direct medical supervision. And that means that because it is not able to be approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the doctors can't prescribe it. They can only recommend its use off-label, at least in the eyes of the federal government. A Schedule I designation means that in the eyes of the federal government, theoretically, they consider marijuana to be more dangerous than FDA-approved substances like fentanyl and cocaine and PCP, believe it or not, which are all Schedule IIs. Now, that applies to us. That's important for us for this reason, that even if you have a medical marijuana card, even if you have a medical condition for which cannabis therapies are the only thing that works for you, this is you've tried other things, you've tried other medications, but you found that, the cannabinoids are the only thing that alleviates your suffering. Then we're back to those choices and consequences again. Because the courts have ruled on this, and they have ruled that if you are working in the trades, if you're working in construction or manufacturing or oil and gas or any place that has a drug-free workplace program, then you can't have marijuana in the active metabolite, the delta-9 THC. You can't have that in your system, even if your doctor believes that's the best thing for you. And there was a court case. This gentleman, Mr. Coates, it was Coates versus Dish Network. This gentleman was in a terrible accident. He was paralyzed from the neck down. He had some limited movement where he was able to do data entry for For Dish Network from home, Dish Network as a corporation had implemented a zero-tolerance drug-free workplace drug and alcohol testing program. His name got drawn as part of the random testing. He tested. He failed because the only thing that relieved his horrible back spasms and chronic pain were the cannabinoids that the doctor was recommending. So he took that to court, and even though medical marijuana had passed in Colorado, they ruled that when there's a state law and a federal law, the supremacy clause of the Constitution applies. And so as long as marijuana remains illegal at the federal level, Schedule I drug, then employees won't be able to have it in their system on the job, even if you have a medical card. Okay. Now, measures are being taken to address that. The Department of Health and Human Services has proposed moving marijuana from Schedule I down to Schedule III, which would be down in the same classification as like codeine cough syrup and ketamine and topical steroidal creams, etc. Probably a more logical placement for it. But these bureaucracies are very territorial. And in order for that recommendation to be approved, the Drug Enforcement Administration has to approve it. Because right now, it is if and or when it's going to happen is completely up in the air. The other important court case that I wanted to mention while we're doing this is Timmons versus General Motors. And even if that does happen, even if the DEA was to go ahead and allow for marijuana to be rescheduled down to Schedule III, even if they completely unscheduled it, which is what some advocates are calling for, and they decided to regulate it just like alcohol and tobacco, then this court case would apply. Because Timmons versus General Motors has to do with workers being on the job while impaired. And this court case out of Illinois was crystal clear. They said that the right of a worker to be on the job impaired does not supersede or is not more important than the right of everyone else to be on the job or on the road safely. And so even if you had a medical card, even if you had a prescription, even if it were just legal, just like with alcohol, you still have to be fit for duty on the job. You can't go into work drunk. Even if you're taking like powerful medication, no one's saying you can't get your prescription filled. Nobody's saying you can't buy it or possess it or take it. They're just saying you can't do it while you're working. You can't do it if it's going to be unsafe to you or other people. And so those are the two that are actually, I wanted to bring those that clarification to this issue because I'm being asked about it quite a bit. Okay. Now, one quick thing I want to mention also, and I know for some of you who have been through my class before, I mentioned this last year. The CBD oils that are available on the shelves right now, and the Delta 8 and the Delta 10 products, which have kind of been rendered moot or useless now that Issue 2 passed. Those contain a little bit of Delta 9 THC. All of them. And they're not FDA regulated, so they often contain a lot more than what is listed on the label or what is advertised. And if a person is taking those substances on a regular basis, as their body breaks them down from the Delta 9 THC, which is psychoactive and brings about cognitive or psychomotor impairment, breaks it down into the hydroxy THC, which is an inactive metabolite, and then breaks it down into carboxy THC, which is a completely non-psychoactive compound, which at that point it stores in our fat cells, stays there for a long time. As our body burns off our fat, that chemical is re-released back into the system. But I want to be very clear: it doesn't get it's non-psychoactive, so it doesn't get the person high again. It just shows back up in drug tests, and it can show up for weeks or months after a person stops using, depending on their usage pattern. So I know a lot of times folks ask me, the CBDs are really helpful. Can I use those? I wanted to remind you that the CBDs, because they are not regulated, even those that pretend to be isolates or pretend to have all of the other the cannabinoid compounds removed from the oils, you have to look at them skeptically, because they are not regulated like standard medications would be. And it is possible for you, if you're taking those on a regular basis, to have enough of that Delta 9 build up in your system to have you fail a drug screen. And I'm seeing it on a weekly basis. I just wanted to share this thing with you. As far as CBD goes, it's an easy anagram to remember that CBD can be detectable. Be careful if you're using those products. Beyond that, I've got one more warning for you, one more bear trap. If for as long as I've been doing this, and I'm talking 20 years, I've been asked probably at least 1,000 times, can I really fail a drug test from eating poppy seeds? And for that whole time, the best minds in our field have told us, no, that is not a real thing. That was a defense that some fast-talking lawyer came up with to bamboozle a bunch of slow-thinking jurors to get their client off the hook. Things changed. In February of last year, the Department of Defense issued a warning to service members that the poppy seeds that are now entering our food supply are not necessarily properly washed. And so when they are entering the food supply, if they were gathered and collected from a field where those poppies were grown to produce opium, then those seeds are contaminated and covered with opium. Now, it's likely not going to be enough where a person would ever feel anything or notice anything, but it is enough with the very sensitive testing methodologies that are used in labs to detect the presence of that opioid and to cause the person to test positive for codeine. So, to add on to all of my other good news so far, if you're a fan of the poppy seeds, you may want to switch to the sesame seeds, because apparently this is a real thing. And I would hate to see you get in trouble for something that you did not do wrong. Right. Now, some other changes that have happened that I want to share with you, that you may be hearing some whispers about. Back in May, the DOT announced that they are going to be allowing oral fluid testing to be a co-equal technology to urine testing for federally regulated drivers and other workers. Now that is on hold right now. They've approved it, but they're waiting for enough federally approved labs to get the technology and the technicians in place to be able to offer it universally. Once they do, then there will be, when a person gets called for DOT testing, they'll be told at the time whether they're going to be asked to submit a oral fluid or a urine test. All right. On June 1st, last summer, the Bureau of Workers' Compensation also agreed to allow for oral fluid testing for non-federal workers. And so right now, if you are on a job site and you get tapped on the shoulder for a random drug test, you may be asked to submit to a urine test or an oral fluid test. And I want to make sure that you understand this so that you can share this information with anyone you know who may be engaging in any hijinks. Because I imagine most of the folks in this room have heard stories about people who would buy products online, or would borrow urine from, or I guess ask for urine. I don't know if they give it back. Would ask for urine from someone that they knew would pass a drug test, and they would then put it into some container and tuck it away into some place where they could keep it at room temperature, wherever that might be, and then fish that container out once they hit the restroom at the collection site, and pass off someone else's urine for theirs, or something that they bought from a head shop or bought online or whatever. The best thing about the oral fluid tests is that they are always observed. There are protocols that are utilized to make sure that they are not tampered with or adulterated, that we go through those stages, those steps, to make sure that the specimen that we collect is actually what's in that person's body. And so I hear some folks that are alarmed or that are complaining because the detection window is significantly smaller, because it actually tests for the active compounds that are in a person's body. So like if a person is using cannabis, that they would likely test positive for about 24 to 48 hours after use, instead of for 4 to 6 weeks. But my question to them would be this: what is more important to you? To be able to have that long detection window that is, for a test that is easily circumvented, or to actually get an accurate specimen out of the person's body? I would much rather know that I'm getting an accurate specimen. I know what it is, and I know that the person that's being tested is safe. That's just me. All right. The last part of this is for employee assistance programs. Employee assistance programs are counseling and rehabilitative services that are made available to employees of employers who have these programs in place. These services are confidential. They are affordable, accessible, and these are generally services in virtually every employer, that if a person comes forward voluntarily of their own accord and asks for help with a substance use issue before they have violated their policy, before they've been caught, before they get a positive test, before they drop their vial of cocaine in front of their manager or whatever. If they ask voluntarily of their own accord, then it's treated like a medical issue, not like a policy violation. And they're offered a second chance, even in most cases in places where there's a zero tolerance policy. This is an amazing benefit that's part of this program. It's not just for substance use issues. It can be for any number of other issues as well. For if you're dealing with emotional distress, you're dealing with relationship issues or financial issues. We've been, as we are an employee assistance provider, we've been helping folks with expungements. Ohio changed their expungement laws to allow for a ton more, a bunch more offenses to be sealable. And so we've been helping folks with those. There's a lot of different things that, a lot of different services we provide, but being able to come forward and ask for help before you hurt yourself or somebody else is probably, I would say, one of the most valuable elements of it. Now, when we're talking about EAP services, I mentioned emotional distress. Mental health is defined as a state of being in which a person can handle their own affairs, that they can handle the normal stresses of life, and they can contribute meaningfully to those around them, to those in their lives and their communities. When a person is experiencing mental illness, They experience a condition that disrupts their ability to think, feel, and act, or the way that they think, the way that they feel, and the way that they behave. If you recognize that something is wrong, that you haven't been happy for a long time, that things just aren't working, whatever working means to you, and that you've been carrying around this burden, carrying around this issue that you would just like to get some help with, then help is available. And I want to share this idea of a monkey trap with you, and then I'll be wrapping things up. A monkey trap is set by poachers in areas where monkeys are abundant. In order to catch them, they don't have elaborate traps or nets or anything. All they have to do is set out they can use a natural object like a tree with a knot hole, or they can put out a vase or a gourd that they've hollowed out, and then they put food stuff in there that the monkeys like, whether it's a banana or nuts or berries, whatever. But so whatever it is, they put enough of it in there so that when the monkey grabs a handful of it and they try to extract their hand gets stuck. And once they're stuck, they panic, and the poachers can just go walk right up and snare them. If they just would let go of what they had in their hands, they could just scamper free, go up the tree, go on about their lives. But they cling to that thing that they like, and they end up losing everything. For a lot of us, we have our own monkey traps. As Americans, we are the most in debt, obese, over-medicated, and addicted population in world history. Those are both symptoms and causes of poorly managed mental health. If you need help letting go, if you need help getting out of your monkey trap, EAP services can be really helpful with that. And I think it's an important part of our maintaining our well-being and our mental and our self-care, to regularly evaluate the various circumstances of our life to see if what we're doing is still working. If what we're doing is if we're doing it just out of habit or out of because it's easier to keep doing it than to make a change. I'm very fond of a saying. I actually used to have it printed on the back of my business cards. It said, "When you've had enough, you'll know." When you've had enough, you'll know. Whatever it is, whether it's a bad relationship or a bad job, bad health, bad whatever, if you're sick and tired of being sick and tired and you want things to get better, you can. And it's an incredibly hopeful message. It's the reason why I became a counselor. Because I had a professor at one point when I was going through my counseling coursework who said that when you stop doing what you did, you stop being who you were. That if you can behave your way into a situation, you can behave your way out of it. And if you're unhappy with the situation that you're in, you can take those steps to start getting yourself out. Life is too damn short to be miserable. If you need help, don't be too proud to ask for it. I know I've shared this with you before, the life hack breathing technique. Anytime, if you're feeling stressed, overwhelmed, there's a nerve system that we have called the vagus nerve. It goes over our ears, down our carotid artery, through our abdomen, or, down through our chest, fans out in our abdomen. We can activate this nerve system, which brings about a feeling of calm and well-being by simply breathing in a very specific way. We breathe in through our nose for 4 seconds and out through our mouth for 8 seconds. So breathing in until all 4 chambers of your lungs are filled, and then breathing out through your mouth until you feel all the air pushed out of your lungs. If you do that for 2 minutes straight, 4 seconds and 8 seconds is 12 seconds. Do that for 10 cycles, you get to 120 seconds or 2 minutes, and it will bring about a significant feeling of calm and well-being. You can take this to the bank. Stop at if you don't believe me, stop at a Rite Aid, Walgreens, CVS. Pop your arm on a blood pressure cuff. See what your baseline is. Do 2 minutes of deep cleansing breaths. Pop your arm back in. Your top and bottom number will drop by 10 points. I guarantee you. And while you're doing that, you can send yourself calming messages to help you hit a reset button anytime during your day. If you take nothing else away from this today, take that. Just because you got off on the wrong foot doesn't mean you have to be on the wrong foot the rest of the day. Unfortunately, I'm not going to delve too much into this, but in the construction and extraction trade, suicide is still the leading cause of death. If you are concerned that somebody may be suicidal or at risk of suicide, you're not sure what to do, I'll send this slide deck to any of your HR folks. If the folks are talking about suicide, if they're giving away their prized possessions, if they're behaving recklessly or behaving in ways that have you concerned, then it's important that you're aware of the Department of Health and Human Services' new 988 crisis line. The 988 Lifeline is available to anyone, anybody, anywhere in the United States, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can call, you can text, you can chat. It is manned by live mental health professionals that specialize in crisis prevention, intervention, and remediation. These are literally, in many cases, the folks who talk people off of ledges, and those are the folks who will be on the other end of the phone. It's anonymous, it's confidential. If you contact them and tell them what's going on, they can help to if you're spinning out, they can help you calm down and to see things more reasonably. But most importantly, they have at their disposal a treasure trove, a gold mine of community-based resources for every single community across the United States. And so whether it's you that needs the help or a loved one, if you're not sure what to do and you're concerned, you can contact them. They'll walk you through what to do, and they can help you compile a list of resources that are available so that when you talk to that person, you can have those at your fingertips and ready to help. Okay. Again, I would hope to God if it was you or your loved one that somebody would be there to help them, and that or if it was that you would do the same for someone else. Again, knowledge is power, and knowing that these resources are available can make all the difference. On that same note, and I want to leave you with this. Even though all these resources are there, even though I am asking you to look out for each other, if you are the person who is struggling, if you're the person who's dealing with suicidal thoughts, if you are hurting and you are becoming hopeless, it's our responsibility to take the first step. It's our responsibility to ask for help if we need it. It has been my experience without exception that when people ask, there are people there, there are folks there who want to help. But they're not mind readers. If you need help, ask for it. There's more resources again than there's ever been. Again, life's too short to be miserable. And it goes by too fast to give up. Okay. Any questions for me about anything we've gone over? Yes, sir.
What significant changes, if marijuana did get rescheduled to a class 3, would that apply to legal states?
For those of you who may not have heard in the back, gentleman asked, if marijuana were moved down to Schedule 3, what would that mean? It would just mean that doctors would be able to prescribe it instead of recommend it. If a person was prescribed cannabis medication, they could take the medication just like any other medication, and if they had trace amounts in their system, say like if a person today went to the dentist and had a tooth extracted, and then took hydrocodone today, tomorrow, and the next day as prescribed. The following day, they showed up for work and were called for a drug screen. They would still have trace amounts of hydrocodone in their system, but the medical review officer would be able to verify that they had a valid prescription. They could change their negative test or their positive test to a negative test. Their employer would never be notified. It would never be an issue. MROs, medical review officers, do not have that ability now because of the schedule and classification with marijuana. If doctors were able to prescribe cannabis meds, it would be treated the same way. Also, researchers would be able to do FDA quality research on cannabis medications. Right now, for the most part, all they're allowed to do is research on how harmful marijuana is. And so that would, that'd be a significant change. Okay. Any other questions, folks? If not, I want to thank you all for your time and your attention. Have a great rest of the day. All right, thank you.